I never thought my life at 50 would feel like a dimly lit room, where the shadows of routine stretch longer than the days themselves. My name is Lillian, and for over 2 decades, I've been locked in a quiet, predictable dance with my husband, Eric. A dance with no surprises, no fire, just the steady rhythm of familiarity. But one weekend, a single spark threatened to burn it all down. A luxurious getaway, a steamy thermal pool, and a stranger's gaze that saw right through me ignited something I thought was long dead. Now, I'm standing at the edge of a choice that could shatter everything I've ever known. What did I do when temptation whispered my name? Picture this. A single flickering candle on a worn oak table, its tiny flame trembling as if it knows it's the only thing daring to disturb the stillness of the room. That's how I've come to see my life at 50. Steady, quiet, barely a whisper of movement. My name is Lillian, and for over 25 years, I've been tethered to Eric, my husband, in a marriage that feels more like a well-rehearsed play than a passionate dance. We've carved out a life together, but it's not the kind of story you'd tell around a campfire. It's more like a calm river, no rapids, no unexpected turns, just a slow, predictable drift. Our days blend into one another, a muted palette of routine. We sit through dinners with little more than the clink of forks against plates to fill the silence. I've taken up knitting, a way to keep my hands busy while my mind wanders. And Eric buries himself in his newspaper or the latest historical biography. I can still see us now, in our living room, the dim glow of a lamp casting long shadows across the faded rug. I'm perched on the edge of the couch, needles clicking softly as I work on yet another scarf no one will wear. Eric is in his armchair, the paper rustling every so often as he turns a page, his brow furrowed like he's solving some great mystery. The only other sound is the relentless ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner, each second stretching into eternity. It's a scene we've played out 1,000 times, and yet, in those moments, I can't help but wonder, is this it? Is this all there is? There's a quiet ache in my chest, a longing for something I can't name. Something beyond the safe, familiar walls we've built around ourselves. Eric is a good man, don't get me wrong. He's steady as a rock, a high school teacher who thrives on structure and order. Spontaneity isn't in his vocabulary. He's the kind of person who plans his week down to the minute, who finds comfort in the predictability of grading papers and preparing lessons. He's kind, always has been, but there's a distance between us. An invisible wall that neither of us seems willing to climb over. I see it in the way he looks at me sometimes, his eyes behind those wire-rimmed glasses clouded with something I can't read. His salt and pepper hair has thinned over the years, and there's a perpetual slump to his shoulders, like the weight of all those years of routine has settled there. I catch my own reflection in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back. Graying hair pulled into a loose bun, a few extra pounds softening my middle, and laugh lines etched deep into my skin, reminders of joys I can't quite recall. I work part-time as a librarian, a job that suits me in its quiet orderliness. The library is my sanctuary, a place where everything has its place, where whispers I remember the evening everything started to shift as clearly as if it were yesterday. I was in my usual spot on the couch, the familiar weight of knitting needles in my hands, when the front door creaked open. Eric stepped in, his face lit with a kind of energy I hadn't seen in ages. In his hand, he clutched a glossy certificate, the kind with gold foil edges that shimmered under the dim light of our living room lamp. He didn't even take off his coat before he was standing in front of me, his voice almost trembling with excitement. "Lillian, you won't believe this. I won a weekend getaway for 2 at a luxurious hotel. It's got a thermal pool and everything. It was a raffle at the school fundraiser." I just stared at him, my needles frozen mid-stitch. Eric? Winning a raffle? The man who plans every detail of his life down to the last second? who wouldn't dream of leaving anything to chance. It was so out of character that I almost thought he was pulling my leg. But there it was, that certificate in his hand. Proof of something so unexpected it felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. A weekend away? That wasn't us. We were the couple who found comfort in the creak of our old house, in the predictability of our quiet evenings. The idea of a fancy hotel, with its polished surfaces and unfamiliar spaces, made my stomach twist with unease. But then I saw it, a flicker in his eyes, a spark of something alive, something I hadn't seen in years. It was like a glimpse of the man I married, the one who used to dream with me before life settled into its unyielding rhythm. How could I say no to that? So, despite the knot in my chest, I nodded. All right, Eric, let's do it. Packing for the trip was like stepping into a memory we'd long forgotten. We fumbled through it together, awkward and unsure, like teenagers figuring out a first date. I dug through my dresser and pulled out an old swimsuit, one I hadn't worn in over a decade. The fabric felt foreign in my hands, a relic of a time when I didn't think twice about slipping into something like that. I held it up, catching my reflection in the mirror, wondering if I could still pull it off. Eric, meanwhile, was treating the whole thing like a mission. He double-checked the hotel address at least 3 times, muttering to himself as he folded his clothes with military precision. Watching him, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of amusement and nerves. What were we even doing? The drive to the hotel stretched over 2 hours, winding through narrow country roads that seemed to go on forever. The car radio played soft jazz, the kind of music that fills the silence without demanding attention. But the quiet between us felt heavier than usual, weighted with unspoken thoughts. I stared out the window, watching the blur of trees. As the evening settled over the hotel, Eric and I found ourselves wandering toward the thermal pool area after a quiet dinner. The air was thick with the scent of minerals, a sharp, earthy tang that seemed to cling to my skin. The pool itself was a marvel, a shimmering expanse of warm water with a cascading waterfall at one end, its gentle roar echoing off the stone walls. Steam rose in delicate tendrils, curling like a veil around us, softening the edges of everything. I sat at the pool's edge, my old swimsuit feeling a little too snug, a little too revealing. But the dim lighting offered a kind of mercy, hiding the imperfections I couldn't help but notice. My feet dangled in the water, the soothing heat seeping into my bones, easing the tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Eric stood nearby, his swim trunks of faded navy, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in ages. He glanced over with a small smile and said he'd booked a massage, asking if I'd be okay staying by the water for a while on my own. I nodded, almost relieved for a moment of solitude, and watched as he disappeared down a tiled hallway, his footsteps fading into the murmur of the waterfall. Alone now, I let my thoughts drift, tracing lazy circles in the water with my toes, the warmth lulling me into a kind of quiet reverie. The steam blurred the world around me, and for a moment, it felt like I was the only person in existence, suspended in this strange, dreamlike space. That's when I noticed him. A stranger approaching through the mist. He was tall, balding, with deep wrinkles framing piercing blue eyes that seemed to cut right through the haze, right through me. His name, I'd soon learn, was Julian. He moved with a deliberate slowness, as if every step was measured, and when he spoke, his voice was low and gravelly, like stones tumbling over each other. "You're so real," he said, and before I could respond, his hand brushed my shoulder, lingering just a heartbeat too long. I should have pulled away, should have said something to break the moment, but I didn't. Instead, a jolt ran through me, electric and unfamiliar, a sensation I hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. It was as if something dormant inside me had flickered awake. We started talking, and it was effortless in a way I hadn't expected. He mentioned his love for Hemingway, the rawness of those stories, while I confessed my fondness for Austen's intricate worlds. We swapped tales of our reckless younger days, mine filled with late-night drives and impulsive decisions, his with adventures I could only imagine. And then, somehow, we landed on the weariness of middle age, the way life seems to pile up on you until you're not sure who you are anymore. There was a quiet intensity to him, a way of listening that made me feel seen, truly seen, as if every word I stumbled over mattered. I found myself leaning into the conversation, drawn to the weight of his gaze, the way his presence seemed to fill the space around us. Then, in a moment that felt both surreal and inevitable, he reached for my wrist, his touch soft but firm, and guided me away from the pool's edge. We moved toward a shadowed corner behind the waterfall, where the mist hung thicker, obscuring us from anyone who might glance our way. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might betray me, its rhythm drowning out the doubt screaming in the back of my mind. The sound of the water was a constant roar, a curtain of noise that seemed to shield us from the world. In that hidden space, with the steam wrapping around us like a cocoon, Julian's hands moved with a certainty that felt both foreign and intoxicating. It was a dance of whispers and warmth, a moment where boundaries blurred under the water's surface, where I let myself surrender to something I hadn't known I craved. I won't shy away from the truth. I liked it. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, and even now I can't bring myself to regret it. There's a rawness to that admission, a weight of guilt tangled in my thoughts as I stepped out from behind the waterfall. The cool air hit my damp skin, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. My hair clung to my neck in wet strands, and my heart was still racing, a wild drumbeat echoing the chaos of what had just happened. I tried to steady my breathing, to pull myself together, but every nerve in my body felt raw, exposed. I smoothed my swimsuit with trembling hands, as if that could somehow erase the last few minutes, and forced my legs to move forward, back toward the open pool area where the world felt less like a secret. There he was, Eric, sitting on a lounge chair near the edge of the pool, his massage apparently over. He looked relaxed, almost too calm, his hands folded in his lap, a towel draped loosely over his shoulders. The dim light caught the edges of his wire-rimmed glasses, and for a moment, I couldn't read his expression. His eyes met mine, searching, probing, but there was no anger there, no storm waiting to break. Just something else, something unreadable. My stomach twisted as I walked toward him, the wet tile icy under my bare feet, each step heavier than the last. I braced myself for accusations, for the cold silence I'd grown so used to over the years, or maybe even a question I wasn't ready to answer. But instead, as I reached him, Eric smiled. It was a small, knowing curve of his lips, the kind that sent a chill through me, not of fear, but of unease. It wasn't the smile of a man who'd been betrayed, or at least, it didn't seem to be. It was the smile of someone who held a secret, someone who'd been watching a game unfold and knew the next move. I sat down on the chair beside him, the plastic creaking under my weight, and the air between us felt thick, heavy with all the things we weren't saying. I could still feel the ghost of warmth on my skin, the memory of a touch that wasn't his, and I wondered if he could see it on me, if guilt was written in every line of my face. Then he spoke, his voice low, almost casual, but with an edge that cut through the haze in my mind. I arranged it with the staff. I wanted to see if you were still capable of spontaneity. You surprised me. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I wasn't sure I'd heard him right. Arranged it? A test? My mind spun, reeling as I tried to piece together what he meant. Did he know? Had he suspected something might happen? Or had he somehow orchestrated a moment to see how I'd react? The implications crashed over me like waves, each one colder than the last. I opened my mouth to respond, to ask what he meant, to demand an explanation, but nothing came out. I must have looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air, my lips moving uselessly while my brain scrambled for footing. And Eric just watched me. That same enigmatic smile lingering on his face, his eyes steady behind those glasses, giving nothing away. A storm of emotions churned inside me. Confusion, sharp and dizzying, because I couldn't wrap my head around what he was saying. Anger, too, bubbling up hot and bitter at the thought of being manipulated, of being a pawn in some game I hadn't even known I was playing. And yet, beneath it all, there was a strange, unsettling relief. He wasn't furious, he wasn't storming off or throwing accusations. He was just sitting there, looking at me like he'd uncovered something he'd long suspected. I didn't know if that made it better or worse. My hands clenched in my lap, the damp fabric of my swimsuit suddenly feeling suffocating, and I couldn't find a single word to bridge the gap between us. We didn't speak after that. Not a word. We stood up together, as if by some unspoken agreement, and left the pool area, the sound of the waterfall fading behind us as we walked through the tiled corridors back to our room. The wait. As we made our way back to the hotel room after that charged moment by the pool, the silence between Eric and me felt like a living thing, pressing down on my chest with every step. The tiled corridors seemed endless, the soft echo of our footsteps the only sound as we moved through the dimly lit halls. My mind was a whirlwind, replaying his words over and over. I arranged it with the staff. I wanted to see if you were still capable of spontaneity. What did that even mean? Was it a confession of manipulation, a test of my loyalty, or something else entirely? I couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see that knowing smile again. So I kept my eyes on the floor, watching the patterns of the tiles blur beneath my feet until we reached our door. Once inside, the room felt smaller somehow, the walls closing in as we moved through the motions of getting ready for bed. I changed into a soft cotton nightgown, the fabric cool against my still damp skin, and slipped under the crisp hotel sheets. Eric did the same, his movements methodical as always, folding his clothes with precision before joining me. We lay there, side by side, in the king-sized bed, the space between us both vast and suffocating. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the faint cracks in the plaster, unable to close my eyes. Sleep was a distant dream, an impossibility with the weight of the day pressing down on me. I could feel the heat of him next to me, the familiar presence of his body, but it felt different now, charged with questions I didn't know how to ask. The silence was heavy at first, thick with all the things we hadn't said. It wrapped around us like a fog, making every breath feel labored, every thought sharper. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, to spill out the tangle of guilt and confusion knotting up inside me, but the words wouldn't come. They stuck in my throat, sharp and jagged, and I swallowed them down, letting the quiet stretch on. Minutes bled into hours, or so it seemed, the darkness of the room broken only by the faint glow of moonlight slipping through a gap in the curtains. It painted a sliver of silver across the foot of the bed, a quiet reminder of a world outside this moment, outside this mess we'd found ourselves in. Then, without warning, I felt a shift beside me. Eric's hand moved under the covers, tentative at first, searching until his fingers brushed against mine. My breath hitched, a small involuntary sound in the stillness, but I didn't pull away. His palm settled over my hand, the roughness of his skin a stark contrast to the smooth sheets, a grounding touch that anchored me amidst the storm in my mind. It was a familiar texture, one I'd known for decades, calloused from years of gripping chalk and turning pages, steady in a way that had always felt safe. Now, though, it carried a different weight, a silent question, or maybe an unspoken apology. I let my fingers curl slightly around his, Not tightly, just enough to acknowledge the connection. And we stayed like that, hand in hand, neither of us daring to break the fragile thread holding us together. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time seemed to lose its shape in the quiet of that night. We didn't speak, didn't move beyond that small point of contact, as if words or actions might shatter whatever this was, this delicate, unspoken thing forming between us. I listened to the sound of his breathing, slow and steady, a rhythm that contrasted with the erratic thumping of my own heart. It was a sound I'd heard countless times over the years, lying beside him in our own bed at home. But tonight it felt like I was hearing it for the first time. There was a vulnerability in it, a reminder that beneath the layers of routine and distance, he was still just Eric, the man I'd promised my life to all those years ago. My thoughts spiraled as I lay there, caught in a web of guilt and curiosity. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened by the pool, the rush of feeling alive in a way I hadn't in so long, the way Julie and I wake up before the sun, the hotel room still cloaked in the kind of darkness that feels like it's holding its breath. The air is cool against my skin, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the bed I've just slipped out of. Eric is still asleep beside me, his chest rising and falling with a steady rhythm, his face softened in a way it rarely is when he's awake. His hand, which had held mine through the long, restless night, now rests alone on the sheet, fingers slightly curled as if searching for something lost. I watch him for a moment, a pang of something I can't quite name tightening in my chest, before I pull my robe around me, the soft fabric whispering against my skin as I tie the sash. There's a faint sound, a soft rustle at the door, barely audible over the hum of the early morning silence. My curiosity nudges me forward, my bare feet padding quietly across the cool hardwood floor. I bend down, my breath catching as I notice a small, folded piece of paper that's been slipped beneath the door. It's unassuming, almost innocent-looking, but my fingers tremble as I pick it up, the edges rough against my skin. I unfold it slowly, as if delaying the inevitable, and there, in a slanted, handwritten scrawl, are words that hit me like a sudden gust of wind. When you want to feel it again, you'll find me by the waterfall. Julian, a rush of heat floods my face, burning from my cheeks down to my neck, as if my body remembers before my mind can catch up. The memory of his touch, unbidden and vivid, flashes through me. Those moments behind the waterfall where the world melted away, where I felt a spark I thought had long since died. My first instinct is to crumple the note, to crush it into nothing and pretend it never existed, to bury this secret beneath layers of denial. But I don't. My hand hesitates, hovering over the paper, and instead I fold it back up with deliberate care, slipping it into the pocket of my robe. It's a weight there, a hidden thing I'm not ready to let go of, a quiet rebellion against the life I've always known. I turn back to look at Eric, still lost in sleep, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few feet away. His face is peaceful, almost boyish in the dim light, and a wave of guilt crashes over me, bitter and cold. But there's something else there too, mingling with the shame, a flicker of curiosity, a whisper of what if. What if I followed that note's promise? What if I sought out that rush again? I shake my head, trying to push the thought away, but it lingers like a shadow I can't outrun. This weekend has changed everything. It's like a crack has opened up inside me, revealing something I thought was buried deep, something raw and hungry that I don't fully understand. I've always seen Eric as my anchor, the steady force in a life of quiet routine, but now I'm not so sure. His words by the pool, about arranging things, about testing my spontaneity, still echo in my mind, leaving me questioning who he really is, what he really wanted from this trip. Did he know something would happen? Did he want it to? I don't have answers, and maybe I never will, but the way I see him has shifted, like a photograph that's been tilted just enough to reveal a hidden angle. I haven't gone back to the waterfall. I haven't sought out Julian, haven't let myself cross that line again, but I've kept the note. When we got home, I tucked it away in a drawer, hidden beneath a pile of old receipts and forgotten trinkets, a silent reminder of a moment I can't erase. Every now and then, my fingers brush against it when I'm looking for something else, and my heart skips, caught between guilt and a strange, aching longing. I don't know why I've kept it. Maybe it's a tether to that feeling of being alive, a feeling I'm not sure I'll ever recapture. Or maybe it's a confession to myself that I needed something more, something different. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.